Um, so any any important changes for the week?
No, I don't know if you talked about this last time, but there are a lot of the same diff hash number that produced nothing. It was nothing. It was only, some source code, but everything else was Zippo. This was primarily an EPA,
Hmm.
and they were all the same sequence of letters and numbers. Um, and
Was it?
it's the ones where you get the message at the top that says there's nothing here, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know. Did you see? Did either of you find that at all? I mean, it happens periodically, but
You mean there was
Just
the
source code changes?
yeah, that's just source code, and the same, you know,
Yeah.
diff hash letters, whatever. So that was the bulk of my well, and I was catching up for the last couple weeks.
hmm.
Yeah, I've got nothing either. I mean, that happens pretty regularly for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be good to include that in like the priority
Mhm.
algo that they have working. And I've got some questions about that because it's not it's not generating a score for everything.
I noticed that too. Yeah.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Here, we can jump to that um in the meeting notes. So is there any like pattern to when it is or isn't?
Um, I'm just pulling up an example. This one appears to be just source code changes, no text changes.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't generate a priority number?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
I can drop the link in the chat. If that works for you. I guess you would see it, but obviously in the scanner folder, in the output
Yeah.
folder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There are
So,
things I've found things like that as well.
mm-hmm.
Okay. That is good to know. Um, yeah, because I think the idea was that that was going to be, if it was only HTML source code, it'd get like an automatic priority of 0.1 or something. Um, was the was the plan, I think.
Okay. I've got another couple examples actually at the FWS. And actually the diff, let's see, is there's no diff. They're exactly the same across
Mm-hmm.
all. So it's weird that we'd even be getting an output.
Hmm.
Yeah, let's see, I can pull one up too, I think.
Yeah, actually, yeah, so for the most part, it's like they don't appear to be any different.
Um, Here's one. I'll post one as well, just for the record. Okay.
I wonder if the diffing analysis, it might be a problem in the diffing analysis, not in the um,
Priority.
yeah.
Yeah.
Did you notice if the pages are actually the same or if it just didn't come up with a diff?
It looked exactly the same, yeah.
Okay. Mhm.
So another weird thing actually this week was in the NIH, there's a lot of just blank data in all the columns. Like a chunk of maybe 22, maybe 40 diffs that just don't have any hashes or different text length or priority.
Okay.
Odd.
Yeah.
So just some funny stuff going on. It actually looks like, again, if you look at this one, I've never seen this this message at the top of it. It says, there are no changes to this diff type. Other diff types may show changes.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
I've never seen that banner.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's I get that a lot. That's one.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't tracking, but that's what I'm getting a lot of these days. And then if you go to the various views, you get the same things, right? Let's see.
Yeah,
Highlight.
there's a small source code
Highlighted
change.
render. Right. That's basically what mine was. Yeah. No changes. Yep. And the one that you shared, the source looks like the changes only source is pinked, but there's nothing under it.
Right. It's as if they just like deleted a space or something.
As they deleted the space. That's funny. Weird.
Yeah, so there's a chunk of that stuff too.
Yeah. Jake, on the ones where there were the ratings, the percentage of importance, did they seem to track to what you found?
They are kind of helpful. I think I still need more trials. It's definitely still picking up those regular websites where there's a ton of change. Whether it's let me see.
The news updates kind of things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Those things.
Events and news. Yeah.
Right. And Rob sort of warned us of that, but yeah.
That's okay. I mean, you recognize those websites after monitoring the domain for a certain amount of time. So.
Right.
Yeah.
What about you, Marcy? Have you found it useful?
I think, relatively they seem to track to what's there, certainly in terms of the volume, the numbers of changes and whatever. So yeah, like Jake, I think I need to work with it some more.
Cool. Okay. I'll give the feedback about especially these columns that are blank. I think it might still be an issue with Internet Archive. That I've been importing or uploading the ones that are scraped from both Versionista and Internet Archive, because the Internet before, when they would come up blank, it was because there wasn't yet functionality to compare the Internet Archive in the same way. But that issue had been resolved, but I do wonder if that's like what's contributing to those like 40 in a row, not having any like diff hashes or diff links or something, that maybe that's a hiccup there again. But, and then as far as the like mini HTML code changes, it's a bummer.
But overall, I mean, I think, and I can't remember whether we talked about this, just tracking, but the numbers of changes themselves are definitely down from what we've seen in the past too, just the numbers of lines for every domain.
Yeah, I would agree.
In some ways, that might be helpful that we could then kind of expand the domains, since if all the numbers of changes are smaller, could do more domains. I also know that Liz and Julia both need to step back for Julia, not sure kind of until like Wednesdays don't work for her, and so kind of until like work and other schedule things change, and Liz until her interviewing cycle ends.
Oh, that's what she's in, right?
Late December. So there are more domains that we have been regularly covering that we want to continue regularly covering. We do have a little bit of interest from new volunteers, which is good, and that's kind of based on the old outreach, and so also starting like new current outreach to get more folks in. But yeah, I think adding up those changes, like kind of seeing what the trends have been lately, would help to see what kind of expansion of number of domains for an individual analyst could still be reasonable. So Marcy, I wanted to bring up in the kind of in the miscellaneous category, which always goes at the end. I wanted to bring that up earlier in the meeting because I think there's some important points, especially that actually that each of you have brought up that never quite get talked about. So I thought we should do them earlier this week. And wanted to bring up the kind of really discuss the idea of, do we want to have separate columns for additions versus removals versus changes?
Yeah, that's an old one, right? Yeah.
And if that...
I mean, an easy thing to do at this point, just hearkening back to it, and, again, it's with fewer changes, it's, hasn't stood out so much, but is just to make the column reflect, the single column reflect that it's both. I mean, because you do still have a column that right near on the far right, I think, that is, the choices of content, access, reduction, or addition, right? So it might, part of it might be what we're trying to capture, but from my standpoint, part of it is psychological. So I'm getting ready to call something a change that's an addition, but it says removal at the top, of the column. But it's been a while. I can look at it again, but yeah. So the question is whether that column that was added at the right covers everything. Really covers the substantive aspect of it. Yeah, that's been hanging around for a long time. I'll take a look at it again.
Yeah.
Is that the column titled "Removal of an Entire Web Page or Document"?
Yeah, that might be it. Just look at that.
The only reason I didn't change that one to say removal or addition, I guess there could be an addition of a document, but if we're monitoring a given URL, that means that we won't have known that is when that is added. So by virtue of us monitoring it, we can see if it's removed, but we wouldn't know to be monitoring a brand new URL. So
yeah, I see. The first one that hit me in working on it, though, is column U, link change removal, right? I mean, because there definitely have been additions.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So that's the one. And the question is whether we want to capture that separately as a removal or whether we just want to capture it as a change. That could be one or the other. So that was one. And then yeah, that was the first one.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, yeah. Yeah. But I have certainly found additions of documents so that the title of the Y column is removal of an entire web page or document. And I've
Mm-hmm.
definitely seen documents added.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know whether we just don't want to capture that or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point because it does refer to documents as well. I think the idea with that was like, there's some like web pages that are basically just like an HTML house for a PDF.
Right.
But I think, yeah, we could definitely make that addition. We had already changed the link to be link change removal and addition.
Oh, we did? Okay, good. So that's
Yeah,
column U.
it's column V now
Oh, V. Oh, that's interesting.
because the priority algorithm.
Oh, that's
Um,
right. You're right.
um,
I have it there. Yeah, that's right. It's the next one over. Right.
but
Okay.
all
That's
um,
good. So it's just a matter of my not having copied it over to my header, I guess. I might change this up. Okay, good.
but I think but I do still think that it's worth considering if we want to have them cataloged separately, or if that combination of having a mark in the column for link change removal or addition, and then the column for if this is a change and access increase or a change and access decrease, if that combo is
Mm-hmm.
enough, or if we want
Yeah.
to. I think the pro on one side is to have more specificity. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the con is that then we have a lot more columns. We'd have 3 columns instead of
Right.
1 for each of those.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Um, mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, because basically you're just consider that V column as a change, right? I mean, it's a change, which could be a change where the link is still there, but something's changed about the link or removed or added is probably okay as long as we talk about the content or access change as increased or decreased. I don't know. I certainly don't want to add to the amount of detail that we have to track.
right.
And then, of course, I mean, by just looking at it again, just by inference, then, if you look at W and X and Y, we're talking about change and alteration, which doesn't necessarily say much about whether that's
Mm-hmm.
what the relative amount of removals or additions that might also be reflected in that.
Right. Yeah.
So some of it may just be semantics,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm overly sensitive to them or something.
Well, I think it just comes down to the specificity with which we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are good questions. Maybe before next meeting, I can do some spot checking to see, or like, what I was going to think through that maybe it's not. What I was going to think through is, if kind of going through and seeing if, in instances where people have identified like, a change in one of those columns, and then also that it's an access increase, or an access decrease, if from that we could infer like a greater amount of addition versus removal, and if that's enough, and I can just go through and spot check and see if that tracks, or if it's okay. I'll do that and see. Can I report back on that next week?
Great.
Okay, and then the next one, this is an interesting idea. This, if we want to look at like just kind of gross numbers of website changes under, kind of the frequency of that under Pruitt on like a monthly basis versus Wheeler. I think that could be interesting. Maybe that'll still be maybe we could add that into some of our like more comprehensive work. Just give that frequency diagram a go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of almost a sort of multi-layered one too, because one is just the frequency that has changed over time, right, within this administration, and then what may have changed or may be changing with a particular milestone or action, leadership action. And, certainly the incoming Congress changes of personnel who are going to be watchdogging more would be an interesting milestone also.
Yeah, you see a lot of charting in areas where you can add flags, right? You just see sort of like if you're charting the changes, and here's a flag is when this happened in this agency. So just sort of flagging visually important events.
Right. That's right. Yeah, we talked about
that. Would be cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to put that on. I'm happy to give that a go. Do you think it'd be interesting to do both important changes and total changes? Well, that's tough because what we've actively monitored has varied, but I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say probably total changes, just because the important changes have really, really died down. I was actually just looking at it. It looks like we have 13 since May. Since August.
Yeah, with the new form.
In the new form.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty. I think it does speak to the synthesis work is kind of where this is, I think, going to be interesting right now. Yeah. Which I do want to get to in a minute, more about like what we mean by this stepping back and synthesizing. But The networking conversation. I know Marcy said uh, she'd be interested in thinking through, especially if we like talking with like state, regional, state, and local departments
and environmental departments, right, within the governmental agencies there.
Mm-hmm.
I think you should really get in. Sorry, go ahead, Marcy.
No, go ahead, Jake.
I was going to say Kevin would be a great person to talk to here because he's been working, obviously in creating connections. Yeah, he mentioned that the other weekend quite a bit.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And, part of it too is thinking about reports going out. Part of it is sort of developing relationship, but also thinking about reports going out. And for a particular, like there's the journalist pool, right? But then there are other entities that maybe generally, but also specifically on a topic of a report might be worth doing a little research on and getting the reports targeted to their inboxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I had identified this for the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. There's this American Bird Conservancy, and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology has a RAG, has a newspaper, has a magazine. So it's just something to think about if we, have particular interest groups that would have outlets that they might want to tap into our reports to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm also thinking about the collaboration with organizations in order to do some further contextualizing.
Right, that's what you talked about.
Mm-hmm. Especially because it's been super interesting and also a heavy lift, like get up to speed on what is going on with the sage grouse, and what is this Migratory Bird Treaty Act all about. I think it's been really fabulous, but also could be really efficient to learn from people and work together instead of kind of building from the ground up with that.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what a process would like, or when in a process would be a good time to start like reaching out to another organization. Like,
I think we should just have it note stock, right? Like when we found something, we add a little bit of texture and then, made it clear what's changed. That would be, I think, inappropriate. I don't see there being any problems with that, especially if we're, have a good relationship with or worked with the people, contacts that we have.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
And Sarah mentioned just on the notes docs point, I know that's a big lift, but she did mention that when I saw her the other weekend that she's looking to tidy up the notes docs a bit and get some structure around those. I think it would even be a good idea to go back and see what we have to see if we can take a crack at it. I don't know if there are any that line up well with organizations we've worked with or whatever, but I'm sure we have something to work with.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the challenges that with our some of our reports where they've been delayed somewhat is that we haven't assiduously said, oh, let's catch up and see what else has been happening in those websites since we
Mm-hmm.
put the report together. This just occurred to me. And so, it might behoove us to try to look at those domains to catch up and be on top of it as best as we can too, in terms
Mm-hmm.
of connecting with others.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I found something, for example, I don't know how important it is, but I found just that on the Sage Grouse one that the a site that had the documents, the EIS documents and whatever, they on November 9th posted all the comments from the comment period.
Mm.
Which is interesting. It's a mess. It's like some things are in folders and some things are individual comments, but still they're there, right?
Mm.
And I had always wondered, like with the Clean Power Plan, where you find the comments. But anyway, somebody just in the last week went in and posted those comments, which are a source of information. Also, it's probably good for us to know that. So that's just an example. And it was a function of my content review, right? So I'm looking through it and learning myself, bumping into things. But it's just something to think about, especially if there's been a longish delay, is to try to make sure we're not missing something that's happened.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really good point. I've tried to do that with just like, checking those pages with the new, now that it's in Scanner, not Versionista, it's easier to just change the dates and see what's happened more recently. But I think you're right. That's a good idea, just to definitely put that as part of the process of report writing.
Especially since we are now doing a little more contextualization, and so it could help to. Plus, it helps our credibility. Obviously, as well.
Definitely. That's a good idea. Okay. I think we can skip over or real quick through team updates. You guys all know what's going on with the report writing team. And Marcy, thank you for working on the content review of the Sage Grouse.
Yeah, I'm learning a whole bunch. It's great.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And I should also share, here's, I'll put it in chat and the notes doc, but here's where I've been compiling stuff for fodder for a blog.
Okay, it says I need permission, so.
Oh, well, let me do that then.
Good.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Good.
Okay, here's one without permissions necessary.
Okay, good. Thanks. Yeah.
Oops. There.
Yeah.
Dev team, I guess Jason was there last week, but seems like one of the things that's top on their minds, aside from like getting off of Versionista this month and making sure that's smooth, is trying to think through how to have like a queue system for more efficient automated diffing for when for processing all the diffs that will then get sent to us in the scanner outputs, and to have that separate from the ad hoc, like if someone signs in and wants to search for a certain diff, have those kind of be separate processes. So if you are doing an ad hoc one, you're not like getting kind of stuck behind whatever long list, whatever queue there is, but also having some sort of queue lineup to make the actual automated ones more efficient, so they don't have to like start from scratch, and kind of like start from the most basic part of the like, okay, now I'm going to go scrape this document, but they can just like order up the different part of the processing. Anyway, so that makes a lot of sense, why you'd want two different kind of styles for that. And that's what they're working on. We already talked about the priority column. I haven't gotten any feedback on the training materials, but I'm next week I'll maybe even like we can cruise around in there, and look at it, because I do want to make sure that those training materials are kind of in good shape, as we look to bring on new folks.
Sure.
Is this the doc that I just posted the link in the chat?
Let's see. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually gave this a read through. I think I need to go a little deeper, but it looks really good.
Oh, awesome.
These
Great.
first couple pages, yeah. But I
Cool.
can give this I'll continue scanning this and let you know if anything jumps out.
Awesome. Thank you.
Jake would be the best because he's been the most recent person training others, I think.
I know it's like a wall of text.
Yeah, that's my first on my mind. It's just gonna say it's a little paragraphy.
Yeah.
Good adjective. I like that.
Well, when you're like stepping through a process, it can be challenging. But
Do you think adding in some screenshots at key junctures would be good?
Yeah, for sure. And then I mean I see, honestly, if it's just like bullets or 1, 2, 3, I don't have enough. I have to go through it a little bit, but I can provide some feedback where it might make sense to make it a little bit more of a procedural
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Okay.
But you're right. I mean, a lot of this is contextual, right? Deciding if a change is important, right? There's a lot to say. There's a lot to say there. Making annotations. Since we were talking about process, I thought I would ask so I was throwing this by some of the people on the call last week, but does it make sense? I mean, does it make sense that we start moving away from having analyst sheets in general? Like, I've started just using the scanner output screen from Google Drive, just opening up my pages in there and literally looking through, launching scanner from the links on that, and then just copying down anything important to the important changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we use the analyst sheets for anything, really, right?
In terms of tapping into them for data or whatever right now. Right?
It's just a duplication of the data set of the changes
Right.
that we pull.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I know for a while, maybe when there were more changes, both Sarah and I were doing some of our own personal annotations about things. But overall, but that's really, I don't think that is a big portion of it, of how we use our time.
Yeah.
Or could use our time.
I mean, I just spent, it ended up being half the time I spent just literally copying and pasting stuff into my analyst sheet. So it's just kind of like,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good, I think the nice thing with the analyst sheet is that it becomes the collection for that domain, whereas if it's just the scanner output, it's kind of like, week to week. But you're right that we never really look at those collections of domains beyond, I mean, we look at the important changes doc and then could, could sort or filter by domain.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, that which reminds me of the other way that I was using my own sheets was to do the search on the diff hashes, right, to see where there may have been previous ones that were the same.
Yeah.
And then, but then again, that was also when there were a lot more changes.
Yeah. I mean, it could get tricky when you've got a really long list of changes.
Yeah, but we're not there now.
Well, yeah, NIH can be 60 or odd, 80 odd this week, but I mean, it's when you flow through it and you're looking at, half of them are the same diff, half of them the same change, it's not too hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a thought, but that's kind of what I'm doing with my coverage right now.
Mm-hmm. I think that makes sense. I'd be curious of Justin Shell's. I know he's got like a system where he does a lot of that, like searching for a diff hash, because with the EPA changes, I think he does still get like sometimes like a couple hundred in a week, and so he will go back and search through his whole record for those diff hashes. But I think that's a rare case, and it also could just be like analyst choice. Like, does it serve you to have this collection?
Exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. In the end, we're most interested in capturing important changes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Something to think about is all I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'll make a note of that. I also think it's only a matter of time until we'll be doing all the annotations in Scanner itself, like in the UI. So it'll be a moot point in hopefully a matter of a couple months. And then and that'll be great to have like a real searchable database. This is just sheets. Okay, and then domain allocations, that's, so I think what we need to do to get, to be able to really have a productive domain allocation conversation, is to figure out what our scope is and what our goal, we've said, one of our main goals for 2019 is stepping back and synthesizing, and have said we want to document and contextualize what has changed and what hasn't changed. But I think we really need to put boundaries on that. When we say we want to document what has changed, what do we mean? Do we, for all, for all of the web pages that we've, that we seeded into Versionista and then have been monitoring since then, for it's kind of what are do we want to make sure we have a lot more detail for one one agency, versus others? But just kind of like what is our scope of that? So that then we can think about like how to really tackle that. Because we do have, holes of time, periods of time when certain domains haven't been covered, and then there are certain domains we have that have never been actively monitored. We have the data for them, but nobody's actually looked at it. So obviously, with 5 minutes to go in the meeting, we're not going to tackle that one tonight. But I do. There's this sheet that I am going to share on Slack as well. That I put together just to kind of get our, kind of start brainstorming what our like more specific questions are that then can help us really scope the boundaries of what we want to document and contextualize. And so it kind of, just kind of like introduces like why we want to, just giving that little bit of background, and then gives like a couple of example questions of research questions at really different scopes that would help us figure out with what kind of granularity we want to make sure that we're looking for this next year.
Yeah, this is good. I will definitely give this a read over.
Yeah, it's really thought provoking. It's good.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, part of this scope and what we can accomplish is how much capacity we have as a team, and what we want to. I mean, you can look at that two ways. I guess it's like we have resources available. Do we plan for that, or like do we sort of have what we want to do and then work towards getting that resource through recruiting new members of the group, or
Right.
trying to find other
Yeah,
resources.
that's a good point.
Edgy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are good points, Jake.
So it's tricky, but this is great. I'll give this a read through.
I think it might be worthwhile thinking about things through both of those lenses. I've been thinking of it more in terms of like, what do we want to do? And then how do we like find the capacity to do that? But I also think that both are really valuable. And we could, I think it would behoove us to think through both directions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know why it just reminded me about this thing. I still want to get out. I want Stephen Colbert to do this. I want those environmental quotes, remember, and that I found that got removed.
Oh, yeah.
Some crazy ones got removed and others got added. I mean, the removals are very, and Annie, before she took off, started communicating with me a little about how to visualize that and create some visualization for that. But
have you reached out to him yet?
No, I haven't, but because I want to frame it, I want to sort of do it right. And part of the problem in terms of visualization, like we even have had on the hydraulic fracturing report and on the stage grouse one, is that there, this like one page that just goes on and on and on and on with text. And so trying to make it compelling and fun and interesting. I actually should probably connect with my UI designer son. He probably has some thoughts.
There you go.
But yeah, so
that'd be cool.
Yeah. So part of that, I think that hit me just because, just in terms of sort of shopping a certain type of capacity when we have a need for it, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's perfect for definitely Stephen Colbert.
Yeah,
or like a Jimmy
I mean, just
thing.
Yeah,
I do have to jump, guys. I'm sorry
Yeah,
to
me
cut
too.
off.
All right. Really good to see everybody, and we'll stay in touch. And Gretchen, I don't know, do you have a deadline for the sage grouse?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I'll just keep plugging away at it. Okay.
Sounds good.
Looking
All
forward
right.
to see how it goes tomorrow with the lifting of the
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's that's where my brain is at this point.
Awesome.
All
All
right. Good
right.
night,
All right.
guys.
Take good
Thanks, guys.
care,
Good
both of
night.
you.
See
Bye-bye.
ya.